This week on Vatican Connections, the Vatican announces it will recognize marriages celebrated by the Society of St. Pius X. Pope Francis chose a lay woman to prepare the meditations for the Way of the Cross in Rome on Good Friday, and we'll give you a recap of the Pope's pastoral visit to Carpi in northern Italy. Hello and welcome to Vatican Connections. I'm Emily Callan. Since this is the first show in April, I'd like to start off the way Pope Francis starts off each month with a special prayer intention. And for April, his prayer is dedicated to young people. His video messages are released by the International Prayer Network. So before we move into our headlines, let's take a look at that message.
Sé que ustedes, los jóvenes, no quieren vivir en la ilusión de una libertad que se deja arrastrar por la moda del momento, que apuntan alto. ¿Es así o me equivoco? No dejen que otros sean los protagonistas del cambio. Ustedes, los jóvenes, son los que tienen el futuro. Les pido que lo construyan, que se metan en el trabajo por un mundo mejor. Es un reto, sí, es un reto. ¿Lo aceptan? Pidan conmigo por los jóvenes, para que sepan responder con generosidad a su propia vocación y movilizarse por las grandes causas del mundo.
Three more refugee families from Syria have been welcomed at the Vatican this week, 2 Christian families and 1 Muslim, and they are staying in the apartments at the Vatican. Their arrival was made possible thanks to the humanitarian corridor set up by the Catholic charity Sant'Egidio, the Federation of Evangelical Churches in Italy, and the Waldensian Church. The Holy See press office affirmed this was a concrete response to the Pope's request made in September 2015 during one of his Angelus reflections. He had asked that each parish, religious community, monastery, and sanctuary in Europe hosts at least 1 refugee family. Since then, the Vatican has hosted 21 people, and that number includes the families the Holy Father brought back with him from Lesbos when he traveled to Greece on an apostolic visit. The Holy See, thanks to the papal charities, continues to support these families living at the Vatican. Welcoming Syrian refugees is one of the major ways the Holy See is expressing the Church's closeness with those fleeing violence. And the Pope has also repeatedly shared his concern for Christians and other minorities in the Middle East and asked for prayers. Again on Wednesday, during his general audience, Pope Francis appealed to those with political responsibility in Syria at a local and international level to put an end to the tragedy and to bring relief to the population, for too long afflicted by war. This was in response to the chemical gas attack, which killed over 70 people and injured more than 100 in the province of Idlib in northern Syria. He called the attack unacceptable carnage. That same day in Brussels, the Secretary for the Holy See's relations with states, Archbishop Paul Gallagher, also urged all parties involved in the Syrian conflict to spare no effort to end the seemingly endless cycle of violence, to restore that sense of solidarity, he said, that is the basis of social cohesion and peaceful coexistence. He was speaking to members of the European Union. Moving on to a whole other topic concerning marriage. Earlier this week, the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei Commission, charged with facilitating full communion between priests, seminarians, and religious, and the Holy Father, released a letter from Pope Francis stating that marriages officiated by a priest of the Society of St. Pius X are valid if a priest from the diocese is not available, and providing a diocesan priest consents to the union of the parties. If a diocesan priest is not available, then the local bishop can grant the necessary faculties. The president of the commission, Cardinal Gerard Müller, prefect for the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, explained that the provisions are meant to appease the conscience of the faithful. This is another small step on the path to full communion between the Society and the Holy See. During the Year of Mercy, Pope Francis recognized as valid the absolution granted through confession by a priest of the Society. He specified that he did not want anyone deprived of the sacrament and of the mercy of God. Speaking of mercy, last Friday, the Holy Father took up once again his practice of visiting people who are marginalized. In the afternoon, he went to a center for the blind in Rome called Sant'Alisio Margherita di Savoia. He met with the 37 adults and elderly people who reside at the center, as well as the 50 children who receive special training from the Institute. At the end of his time with them, he commemorated his visit by signing a parchment for their chapel. Through this visit, a Vatican statement indicated that Pope Francis wants to continue the so-called Mercy Friday visits carried out during the Jubilee Year of Mercy, retracing the spiritual and corporal works of mercy in favor of those who live in conditions of physical and social exclusion. From 2014 to 2015, the Catholic population in the world grew by 1%, representing 1.285 billion people. These numbers were just released by the Vatican Central Office for Church Statistics, and we have a top 10 of countries with the largest Catholic population. Number 1, Brazil. 2, Mexico. 3, the Philippines. 4, the United States. 5, Italy. 6, France. 7, Colombia. 8, Spain. 9, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and 10, Argentina. Great Britain got some attention this week. On Wednesday, the Pope welcomed a delegation of Muslim leaders in Pope Paul VI Hall at the Vatican. Cardinal Vincent Nichols, Archbishop of Westminster, was also present for this short meeting. They were in Rome to show the importance of interfaith relations in denouncing hatred and violence. The meeting on Wednesday morning was especially significant given the recent attack at the Houses of Parliament in London a couple weeks ago. The Holy Father spoke of the important task all of them must do together. That task is the work of the ear, he said, meaning listening to each other. It's important to take the time to listen and not to give an answer in haste, but to reflect on the word of our brother and sister before offering our answer. He explained that when people have this capacity for listening, they speak with a low and calm tone. But, he continued, when they do not have this, they speak loudly and even shout. Between brothers, it is crucial to listen to each other and speak slowly, the Pope repeated. That is the way to peace. We are already on the path, he added, when we do this. And the day before, Prince Charles and his wife Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, met with Pope Francis as well. They were completing a tour of Italy, which took them to the northern part of Italy, to Amatrice, the town which was struck by an earthquake, and to Florence and Naples. It was their second visit as a royal couple to the Vatican. Their meeting lasted nearly 30 minutes, and the Vatican reported their discussion was relaxed and informal. The British Prince and the Pope exchanged gifts. The Pope presented them with copies of his encyclicals, including Laudato Si, Amoris Laetitia, and Evangelii Gaudium, as well as a bronze olive branch symbolizing peace. The royal couple offered the Pope a hamper filled with homemade products from the couple's estate. Prince Charles admitted it was difficult to know what to give the Pope. The British couple also had a meeting with the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. During their time at the Vatican, they also got the opportunity to visit the Vatican's secret archives. They saw documents and letters dating back to the 16th century, showing the history of the relationship between Great Britain and the Catholic Church. Meetings between the British royals and the Holy Father have been fairly common. Prince Charles and his wife Camilla are not the only ones who got to shake hands with the Pope. Before them, Queen Elizabeth II met with the Pope 8 times. The first time was in 1951. She met Pope Pius XII. In 1961, she met Pope John XXIII. She met John Paul II 3 times, in 1980, 1982, and again in 2000. Then, in 2010, she met Pope Benedict XVI, and in 2014, Pope Francis. But anytime the royals meet a pontiff, its goal is always to help advance relations between Great Britain and the Holy See, since, when they are on tour, the royal family represents the British government, which sees the Holy See's influence in the world and the role it plays, for example, in peace building. They also share common interests. When Pope Benedict XVI visited the Queen in Edinburgh, Scotland, she recognized the Holy See's involvement in improving the situation with Northern Ireland. For centuries, the relationship between the Holy See and Britain was complicated, but Queen Elizabeth II has played a major role in renewing ties with the Catholic Church. Not to mention, she holds the title of Defender of the Faith, something the Church sees favorably. In turn, Great Britain is interested in the way the Pope reaches out to people of faith, and not only Christians. Today, there are 4 million Catholics in the United Kingdom. 50 years ago, in the wake of the Second Vatican Council, Pope Paul VI published his encyclical Populorum Progressio, one of the more important documents on the Church's social teaching. To mark this milestone, the Dicastery for Integral Human Development organized a 2-day conference to look at what kind of impact the encyclical has today. Participants at the conference had a private audience with the Holy Father in the Synod Hall, and in his address to them, he also underlined the anniversary of the creation of the Dicastery. Here's a summary of his speech. Pope Paul VI is the one who helped us understand what full human development means. So what does it mean? Asked Pope Francis. The definition could be found, he said, in the word integrate. He then listed the keys to know what it means by integrating the human person. First of all, it means integrating the different peoples of the earth, which requires solidarity with one another and the fair distribution of goods and resources. Secondly, it also means offering viable models of social integration, that is to say, allowing each person to contribute to the development of society. It is their right and their duty. Thirdly, integration and development of all those elements of which it is truly constituted. Those elements being the economy, finance, culture, family life, and religion. They are all essential to a person's growth and must be taken into account. Then he spoke about the integration of individual and community dimensions. He clarified there are ideological views and political powers that have crushed the person, that have standardized it and deprived it of that freedom without which man no longer feels human. And finally, integrating the body and the soul. It is also essential, for development does not consist in having more and more goods, enabling a solely material well-being, he said. No development can really achieve its purpose if it does not respect the place where God is present to us and speaks to our hearts. He concluded his address by speaking of Jesus, who was both fully human and fully divine. God became man to make of human life a concrete path to salvation, the Pope explained. In this, we find the form of service which rejects neither God nor man. He said, relation, not individualism, inclusion, not exclusion, inviolable dignity, not exploitation, and freedom, not coercion. At the Vatican, each year, one of the biggest events of Holy Week is the Way of the Cross at Rome's Colosseum. The meditations for the event are written each year by someone different: cardinals, religious, lay people, and sometimes non-Catholics. This year, the Pope chose a laywoman, a biblical expert, Anne-Marie Pelletier, to do the job. The meditations follow the 14 stations of the cross and are read at the Colosseum before tens of thousands of faithful. John Paul II is the one who introduced what is known today as the scriptural way of the cross after Pope Paul VI revived the centuries-old devotion in the 1960s. Matteo Ciofi has more on this story.
Anne-Marie Pelletier was asked by Pope Francis to compose the meditation for the Way of the Cross next week. She is a French biblical scholar and professor of sacred scripture and biblical hermeneutics in Paris. It's the first time a lay person will write this meditation. Mrs. Pelletier emphasized that the Pope's decision confirms his attention to the feminine word. Though she joked she doesn't know why she was chosen by the Holy Father. The scholar said she had been invited at the Vatican before, once in 2001 as an auditor for the Synod of the Bishop, and again to participate in a symposium organized by the Pontifical Council for the Culture. Mrs. Pelletier also revealed that she has already met the Pope. Her goal, then, she stressed, is to work for the Church in communion with the Pope in a shared passion for the Word and for the Gospel. When she received the invitation to write the meditation, she said she was very surprised and excited, especially because it means to prepare meditation of a decisive moment in the Christian celebration of the Easter mystery. The death of Jesus on the cross, she continued, goes to the heart of the faith because it faces the ultimate paradox. God suffers violence of men, entering in it to win it with love and forgiveness. Regarding the meditation, the author worked a lot with the Gospel and said to have found inspiration in her own memories, as well as selected writings for the Jewish Eti Hillesum, the German pastor Bonhoeffer, and the Orthodox theologian Christos Yannaras. Last year, Pope Francis appointed an Italian archbishop to prepare the meditation for the Way of the Cross. The year before, the task was given to another bishop from Italy who was just created cardinal last November. At 70 years old, Anne-Marie Pelletier is married and has 3 children. In 2014, she received the Ratzinger Prize and has addressed the issue of women in the Church in several of her publications. Mrs. Pelletier will be the 5th woman to prepare the texts for the Way of the Cross, which will be presided by Pope Francis at the Colosseum. The first time a woman had prepared the meditation was in 1993. The author was Mother Anna Maria Canopi, a Benedictine abbess from Italy.
After visiting Milan, the Holy Father embarked on another pastoral visit last weekend, this time in the much smaller town of Carpi in northern Italy. He spent nearly a full day there, welcomed by thousands of people. He visited the cathedral, families, priests and religious celebrated Mass and prayed the Angelus. The town was struck by an earthquake in 2012, which killed more than 20 people. Here's a recap of his day with the faithful in Carpi. As soon as he arrived in Carpi, Pope Francis was received by the bishop of the town and several officials of the Italian region. Then he went straight to the Piazza Martiri to celebrate Mass in front of the cathedral. He gave the homily, and in it he reflected on the resurrection of Lazarus, the last miraculous sign of Jesus before his Passover. The Pope described the scene. There is only weeping and desolation, and Jesus is deeply moved, greatly troubled, and he wept. There we see the heart of God, the Pope said, a heart close to those who suffer. Yet amidst this suffering, Jesus prays trustfully. That reaction teaches us to not let ourselves be imprisoned by pessimism. On the one side, the Holy Father illustrates there is a feeling of defeat in the face of death. On the other, there is hope, hope which overcomes death and evil. Each of us must choose, the Pope told the faithful, which side to stand on, closed in by sadness or open to hope. In everyone's heart there is a place which is dead, which needs to be restored to life. He cautioned, let us not be imprisoned by the temptation of staying alone and disheartened, of feeling sorry for ourselves, for what happens to us. This is the atmosphere of the tomb. The Lord wants to instead open up the way of life encounter with him, of trust in him, of the resurrection of the heart. Jesus tells Lazarus to come out, find stability in Jesus, and be witnesses of life. Just before the Angelus prayer, Pope Francis blessed the first stones for 4 new buildings in the diocese, which will be used for various ministries. He also thanked the faithful of Carpi, priests, men and women religious, civil authorities, and especially the sick. 4,500 of them showed up for the event, and he encouraged all of them to be agents in the life of the community, in communion with the priests, always focused on what is essential and witnessing the gospel, he said. Following the Mass, he met with diocesan priests, religious, and seminarians in the chapel of the town's seminary, and then went to the cathedral and stopped for a short time to pray before moving on to Mirandola, the Duomo, which underwent significant damages during the 2012 earthquake. The Cathedral of Mirandola is still not accessible, and so in front of the Duomo, however, the Pope stopped and addressed the crowds gathered in the square, calling to mind the events of 2012 and offering his personal encouragement and solidarity. I am aware of how much the earthquake has affected the human and cultural heritage of this land, he said, and the hardships you have suffered. But I think especially of the inner wounds caused by the loss of loved ones. He urged them to have courage to face the future. Before departing for Rome, the Holy Father then placed a wreath of flowers at the monument to commemorate the victims of the earthquake.
Finally, on Wednesday, Pope Francis delivered his weekly catechesis during the general audience. He focused his reflection once again on the virtue of Christian hope, more specifically on giving a reason for the hope that is in us. Here's a summary of that catechesis.
Dear brothers and sisters, in our continuing catechesis on Christian hope, we now turn to the first letter of Peter. The apostle encourages us to rejoice in Christ's resurrection from the dead and to sanctify him in our hearts. Because we have received the gift of new life in Christ, St. Peter urges us to account for the hope that is in us. We are to show forth that hope by imitating Jesus' loving concern for the needs of our brothers and sisters, but also by forgiving those who have offended us. Peter tells us that it is better to suffer for doing good, for in this way we imitate the Lord's redemptive suffering and bear witness to God's infinite love, revealed on the cross and sealed in the resurrection. That love is the basis of all our hope. May our lives radiate the hope that is Christ himself, who dwells within us and acts through us to bring his mercy and peace to our world.
Even in the hardest and most disturbing moments, the Lord's mercy and goodness are greater than everything.
If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send them via Vatican Connections' Twitter page at Vatican Connections. I'll be happy to answer them on our next episode. And that's all for tonight. Thanks for watching and have a blessed Holy Week.